On the morning of my 75th birthday, I heard my daughter-in-law whisper, "Let's hope this is the final one." I simply smiled and said nothing. But the following sunrise, I picked up the phone and set in motion a plan that would shatter their world forever. If this story resonates with you, please consider subscribe now to Winds of Thought and comment where you're watching from.
The celebration was my son Thomas's idea, my only child, forever insisting on making a grand display. The lavish party unfolded in the house I built with my own hands 40 years prior, a space that now felt alien as Sophia, my daughter-in-law, slowly erased my touch from every room. I excused myself from chatting with old friends, heading for the restroom, my legs unsteady, a weakness that had grown since my brother David passed. Walking down the hall, voices spilled from Thomas's office. "I truly hope this is her final birthday." Sophia's voice was cold, her wine glass glittering. "I've already picked out the paint for her library. It will make a stunning walk-in wardrobe." My breath caught. I leaned against the wall for support. "Be patient, my love." Thomas's, my supposed protector, cut through me with icy precision. "Her physician says her condition is worsening. When the time comes, all of this will be legally ours." The clink of their glasses was a sound I would never forget. 50 years in engineering had taught me to assess stability under immense strain. I stood straight, fixed my face into the calm mask I'd mastered in boardrooms full of doubters, and rejoined my party. "To the greatest mother a man could ask for," Thomas toasted later, raising his glass. The same son who had always chafed in my shadow, who seethed when industry papers called him Eleanor Vance's son instead of recognizing his own name. I smiled and nodded, my vision sharper than it had been in years. I saw the entire design now. How Thomas had gradually assumed control after David's heart attack. First, it was managing my technology, then my complex finances, and finally, overseeing the pills for my so-called dangerous blood pressure. That night in my room, I stared at the ceiling. Thomas had always been driven, perpetually seeking a validation his father never gave him. My late husband had been envious of my career, and I now saw that same poison in our son. Dawn arrived. I watched from my window as Thomas and Sophia left for their day. I waited for Clara, my housekeeper of 28 years, the woman I'd supported when her husband passed, whose son's university fees I'd covered through a discreet grant. "Clara," I said softly, "I must tell you something awful, and I require your assistance." Her expression shifted from worry to grim understanding as I laid out the truth. "Miss Vance," she replied, "I've watched them alter your prescriptions. I've known something was wrong. You have my full support." An hour later, alone in my study, I dialed a number I hadn't called in 10 years. Alexander Reed, his voice still resonant and firm. "Alexander," my voice broke. "It's Eleanor." A silence filled with decades of things left unsaid, a partnership I'd ended when I chose duty over passion. "I need your help," I stated, "and I believe you'll be very interested in what I have to say about the Metropolitan Nexus project." I could sense him straightening up, our abandoned dream, the groundbreaking eco-city plan we'd conceived before our lives took different turns. "I'm listening," Alexander answered. For the first time since finding my brother 3 years ago, I felt a spark inside me, not just fury, but direction. January 16th, the morning after my birthday, I sat in my study, dissecting my life with the same rigor I once applied to stress tests. How had I permitted this? Thomas had woven himself into every facet of my world while I mourned David. 3 years back, after his sudden stroke, Thomas stepped in as I reeled. By last autumn, he'd persuaded me to leave Dr. Evans, my doctor for 18 years, for Dr. Miller, his own associate. I studied my unsteady hands. Was this real decay or the result of the chemical cocktail Thomas personally gave me each day? Clara brought in coffee, shutting the door.
I've been recording the medication changes, she murmured, setting a small journal next to me. The bottles don't match what's inside. I started noting this 8 months ago, when you grew worse after each refill. Thank you, I said, genuinely moved. You're risking your job. Miss Vance, when my husband died and Ben needed tuition, you didn't just write a check. You established a fund that let us keep our pride. Some debts are paid with loyalty, not money. They've been paying me extra to report your moments of confusion, but I've been feeding them harmless stories.
Using the secure phone Clara obtained, I called Dr. Evans. "Eleanor Vance," he said, "it's been an age. Thomas told us you wanted to streamline your care with his specialist. Robert, I need your confidential help. I believe I am being systematically poisoned." We arranged to meet at his associate's private clinic in Evanston. That afternoon, while Thomas thought I was resting, Clara drove me. Dr. Evans conducted a full workup. "Your cardiovascular system is remarkably sound, Eleanor. The shaking, mental fog, and fatigue you describe align with anticholinergic poisoning and a potential benzodiazepine overdose, not a progressive illness." I nodded, the final proof. "I am obligated to report this," he said gravely. "Not yet," I urged. "If they are alerted before I have safeguards, they'll hurry their plan or say I'm delusional. I need a little time." He reluctantly agreed to 3 weeks. "How will you avoid taking the pills?" Clara asked on the drive home. "He watches you swallow them." "My late husband was on the stage," I replied. "He showed me a few techniques. I can hide them in my cheek, but I'll need to keep up the symptoms so they don't suspect." Back home, I resumed my part, the weakening mother. That evening, Thomas brought my pills with feigned concern, watching as I placed them in my mouth, drank water, and appeared to swallow while secretly storing them. "You seem better tonight," he noted, studying me. I let my hand shake as I reached for the glass, spilling a little. "Just a moment of clarity, I suppose. They come and go." He nodded, content, and left me. Under my desk lamp, I retrieved the tablets. Tomorrow, I would start assembling the proof that my son was attempting to kill me. February 16th, 1 month later. I'd perfected the routine of pretending to take my drugs while collecting them as evidence. Dr. Evans helped me get proper prescriptions through Clara, letting me heal without alerting Thomas and Sophia. The investigator Alexander hired, Marcus Thorne, was a former detective specializing in crimes against seniors. We met during my scheduled hydrotherapy. Clara would drive me to the clinic, then we'd exit through a rear door where Marcus waited in a nondescript car. "They've been meticulous," Marcus explained, showing me bank statements. "Thomas has been moving money to foreign accounts, small sums initially, growing larger as your health appeared to fade." "How much?" I asked. "Approximately $2.5 million to date?" I nodded, feeling detached. "And the doctor?" "Dr. Miller has a history. 3 affluent patients in the past 6 years, all with similar conditions, all leaving significant assets to relatives who were his clients first." "He eliminates for a network," I said softly. "Not directly. He prescribes drug combinations that cause slow failure. The death certificates all state natural causes, very clean." I examined the documents, my engineer's mind finding the flaws. "Show me the file on Sophia." Marcus paused. "Miss Vance, this may be difficult. I've learned my son is trying to murder me for my wealth. I doubt anything could be harder." He handed me another folder. Inside were pictures of Sophia with an unfamiliar man, clearly more than friends. More alarming were the papers they were examining, plans of my property, appraisal documents. "Daniel Croft," Marcus said, "a realtor known for high-end estates. Before meeting your son's circle, Sophia was looked at for similar exploitation in Boston 5 years ago. The case was closed when the elderly woman passed before testimony. The connections locked into place. So my son wed a professional hunter. It seems so. They're not just waiting for your passing, they're already spending the money." That evening, I began to draw, not schematics, but a different kind of structure, a trap. Every solid engineering design starts with knowing your base. Mine was cracked, but not yet failed. The physical signs of long-term poisoning would take time to reverse. My hands still trembled faintly when exhausted. Sometimes a cognitive haze fell without warning. A frightening reality Dr. Evans said would improve, but perhaps never fully vanish.
These constraints became part of the blueprint. I couldn't fight directly while physically compromised. I needed to engineer a situation where their own deeds would condemn them. The next morning, Thomas entered with water and pills. "I was thinking," I said, adding a note of uncertainty, "maybe we should revise my will soon to ensure everything's correct." Something flashed in his eyes, a hunger poorly hidden as concern. "That's wise, Mom. I'll contact Davies tomorrow." Davies, not my lawyer of 35 years, but his friend from the tennis club. Another piece. After he left, I removed the pills and added them to the growing collection concealed inside a hollowed-out engineering textbook. My recovery would be slow. My justice would be perfectly constructed. Like any master engineer, I knew that haste weakens the entire structure.
March 11th, almost 2 months after the discovery, my physical improvement stayed carefully hidden behind a performance of continued decline. I learned to seem frailer under their gaze, using my private hours to rebuild my strength. Today was pivotal. My meeting with Charles Bennett, a formidable attorney in elder law. Alexander arranged it at his downtown office, disguised as another medical visit. "Miss Vance," Charles said, after reviewing my evidence, "this constitutes elder abuse, financial exploitation, and potential attempted murder. We should contact the authorities now." "Not yet," I countered. "A premature case would be long, exhausting, and might not achieve the complete justice I want. Thomas has connections here. I need an irrefutable case and a plan that stops them from profiting." Charles's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "What is your concept?" I outlined my design, watching his initial doubt become grudging respect. "It's unconventional," he admitted, "but potentially brilliant. The property transfer to a learning institute is particularly elegant and legally sound. The timing of the public reveal is critical. We need all elements positioned before they realize what's happening." After the meeting, Alexander drove me back to the clinic, where Clara waited. "You're taking serious chances, Eleanor," he said, worry in his voice. "I'm eliminating chances, Alexander. Every day I live under their control is another day they might decide to speed up the timeline." The Metropolitan Nexus had been our shared dream, a revolutionary city plan blending sustainable design and community. We'd designed it before our paths split. The Sterling Group, a forward-thinking development company, had contacted me directly 4 months before my birthday, unaware of my supposed decline, since I'd kept my condition private. "They don't know about your situation?" Alexander asked. "My situation is largely manufactured by Thomas and his doctor," I corrected. "Professionally, I've maintained limited but solid contact." At home, I maintained my act, letting Thomas help me review financial papers I wasn't supposed to read closely. Each exchange became evidence, documented via the surveillance Marcus installed while Thomas and Sophia were at a gala. The system was cleverly hidden, tiny cameras and light fixtures I'd designed years ago, audio pickups in the existing sound system. As the original architect, I knew every void, every conduit, every possible observation point invisible to those who hadn't built the space. That evening, I heard Thomas on the phone with Dr. Miller via the surveillance. "She's talking about updating her will," Thomas said, voice tight. "Is it time to adjust her meds again?" "Carefully," Miller replied. "The mix we're using is near its peak effect without clear toxicity. We don't want to raise flags with a sudden collapse. The North Point deal requires capital I can't access yet. We need to move faster." "Patience has served you well, Thomas. Rush now and you lose everything." I was running out of time, but so were they. The institute paperwork was nearly done, the Sterling contract ready for signature, and Grace Lee, an ambitious prosecutor whose mother had collaborated with me early in my career, had agreed to examine my file. April 6th, nearly 3 months into my secret campaign, the physical cost of prolonged poisoning still showed in unexpected ways. Some mornings I woke with my left hand numb. Other days, terms would briefly escape me. Terrifying episodes, Dr. Evans assured me, should slowly lessen. "You need to eat, Miss Vance," Clara insisted, setting a tray by my drafting table, where I worked on the Nexus plans. I looked up, realizing I'd missed lunch again. 3 months of correct medication had helped significantly, but the lasting effects needed management: regular meals, water, planned rest. The Sterling team was impressed, Alexander said during our secure call. They understand your current physical limits, but value your vision more than your ability to visit sites personally, and the institute is fully established as of yesterday. The Vance Institute for Emerging Engineers now legally owns your property. Thomas can't touch it, though he won't know until the filing is public, which we can delay until our move. I allowed a moment of satisfaction. The guest list for the dinner is set, 22 attendees, including Sterling executives, Grace Lee, and several prominent engineering critics. And Thomas's promotion. His office confirmed he's announcing his partnership at North Point, a role requiring the large investment he's been taking from your accounts. That evening, Sophia knocked on my study door, a rare event. "Eleanor, I was considering the anniversary of your first major project next month," she said with false warmth. "What if we host a special dinner at the Grandview Club? Thomas just secured a membership, and it would be wonderful to honor you there." I blinked with feigned confusion, while inwardly applauding their predictability. They were building the perfect stage for their own downfall. "That sounds lovely," I replied, voice wavering. "How kind of you to remember." After she left, I texted Clara. "They're planning their event. May 16th. Perfect." That night, I watched from my window as Thomas had a heated call on the patio. Using the surveillance, I accessed the recording later. "It's taking too long," Thomas was saying. "Miller says we need to move faster. Yes, I know it's a gamble, but the North Point partnership needs immediate capital. The Institute? No, that was just talk. She never did anything. How little he understood me." The next morning, Thomas brought my medication with a new pill added, slightly bigger, with a faint blue tint. "Dr. Miller suggested a supplement for your circulation," he said smoothly. I nodded and pretended to swallow it with the others. Alone, I sealed it in a bag and texted Marcus. "New pill introduced. Need analysis fast." 2 days later, Marcus confirmed my fears. A stronger version of the same drug, designed to accelerate organ damage. They were done waiting. So was I. Over the next week, I finalized every detail of my counteroffensive with Alexander, Marcus, and Charles. Meanwhile, I focused on the Nexus designs, losing myself in the creative flow that defined my life.
Despite the lingering poisoning effects, my engineering vision was intact, perhaps even deepened by my new understanding of creating spaces that accommodate fragility without losing strength or beauty. The countdown to May 16th had started. In engineering, the final stage before unveiling demands the utmost precision. My retribution would demand the same exacting standard. May 11th, 5 days before the confrontation. The change had to be both physical and tactical. For the dinner at the Grandview Club, I needed to embody the internal shift, a visual declaration as powerful as any structure I'd ever engineered. "Too somber," Alexander commented as I tried on a dark designer suit at his apartment where I'd been preparing secretly. My recovery, while real, was incomplete. The tremors still came when tired, and occasional mental gaps required Alexander's patient help. "I'm not attending a funeral," I agreed, though in a way I was. The funeral of the passive woman I'd let myself become. We chose an emerald green dress, architectural in its lines, that emphasized power over frailty. My silver hair, which Thomas had preferred in a soft style, was now cut in a sharp contemporary bob that framed my face with authority. "They won't know you," Alexander said, with something like admiration. That is precisely the point. I practiced walking in moderate heels, a challenge after months of deliberate physical decline, but essential for the impact we needed. 3 hours before the dinner, I met with Grace Lee in her office, finalizing plans. "The officers will be in plain clothes near the exits. We're not making arrests tonight. This is officially an information-gathering occasion, but their presence should prevent any drama. And the documentation." She tapped a leather folder. "All here. Financial records, medical proof, surveillance logs. Enough to begin proceedings, though building a full case takes time. The wheels of justice turn slowly, Ms. Vance.
especially with well-connected individuals. I nodded. I've engineered enough structures to know solid foundations matter more than speed. Clara helped me get ready at Alexander's, carefully hiding the medical monitor Dr. Evans insisted I wear, a necessary precaution given the lasting cardiac effects. "They have no idea what's coming," she whispered, fastening my grandmother's sapphire necklace, the one Sophia had already claimed. As we arrived at the Grandview Club in Alexander's car, I saw Thomas and Sophia greeting guests. My son was impeccable in a new suit. Sophia shone with jewels, some I recognized from my own collection, apparently already transferred to hers. "Ready?" Alexander asked, offering his arm. I felt a brief wave of dizziness, one of the lingering effects that still arrived unpredictably. I took a steadying breath. I've been designing this moment for almost 4 months. We timed our entrance perfectly. After all guests had arrived, just as Thomas was growing visibly anxious about my absence, the host announced, Mr. Alexander Reed and Ms. Eleanor Vance. The room turned. I watched recognition dawn on faces, then confusion, then astonishment. I walked with all the grace my recovering body could muster, head high, steps measured, every inch the celebrated engineer who had once commanded international symposiums. "Mother!" Thomas looked as if he'd seen an apparition. In a sense, he had, the ghost of the woman he'd tried to delete. "Thomas, Sophia," I nodded coolly. "Thank you for organizing this lovely evening." Sophia's eyes flicked between Alexander and me, calculations clear behind her perfect makeup. You're looking well. Remarkable what the right medication can achieve," I replied with a smile that gave away nothing and everything. Through the first course, I watched Thomas struggle to reconcile the frail, confused mother he'd left at home that morning with the commanding woman now receiving praise from his colleagues. When dessert was served, Thomas tapped his glass. "I have an announcement. I'm becoming a partner at North Point Developments. May 16th, the night of reckoning." As Thomas shared his news, I caught Alexander's eye. A slight nod passed between us. "Congratulations, Thomas," I said when he finished. "I have also an announcement." The Sterling executives and my legal team entered on cue, as if waiting in the wings, which they had been. I'm thrilled to announce the official launch of the Metropolitan Nexus project, my voice carrying easily across the silent room.
Months passed. My life became quieter, softer, kinder. And one morning, as I was tending to the flowers outside the building, Mr. Coleman said, "You look happier these days, Ms. Morrison." I looked up, smiling. I am. Because I had something now that I never had before. A home that was mine. A life that was mine. And a heart that finally chose itself first. Karma didn't just come back. It knocked politely, and I opened the door. If you stayed with me until the end, thank you. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. But they also remind us of something far more important. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to walk away from those who take you for granted. You are allowed to rebuild a life where you are valued, respected, and finally at peace. If this story touched you, even a little, please subscribe to Red Silk Revenge. It helps these stories reach the hearts that need them most. And before you go, I want to hear from you. What would you have done if your own child kicked you out? Would you forgive, or would you walk away and rebuild your life like Linda did? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Until next time, take care of your heart and never forget your worth.
July 16th, 2 months after the confrontation at the Grandview Club, I sat across from Grace Lee in the prosecutor's office, reviewing new evidence.
The case against Thomas, Sophia, and Dr. Miller had solidified as financial forensics uncovered the full scheme. The medication evidence is particularly compelling, Grace explained, laying out lab reports. The combinations Dr. Miller prescribed show clear intent to induce symptoms mimicking cognitive decline and heart issues. I studied the reports with clinical detachment, no longer feeling the visceral betrayal. Thomas's accounts. We've traced about $2.5 million moved from your assets to offshore holdings. The court has frozen everything pending trial. My son now lived in a small rental after being placed on leave from North Point. His partnership offer had vanished as news of the investigation spread. And Sophia, staying with a cousin in Milwaukee, she's trying to position herself as another victim, claiming Thomas manipulated her. I smiled thinly. The surveillance recordings suggest otherwise. Grace nodded. Her counsel has approached us about a potential deal. She's willing to testify against Thomas and Dr. Miller for reduced charges. Is it worth considering? Potentially. Her testimony would strengthen the case, particularly against Miller. Medical crimes are hard to prosecute without insider testimony. Later, I met with the Sterling team, my first formal business meeting in years. My recovery continued, though limitations remained. I still tired easily and sometimes lost words, a humbling experience Alexander gracefully navigated. The preliminary designs have generated major interest, Howard Sterling explained as we reviewed the timeline. Your return to active practice is being celebrated in engineering circles. That evening, returning to Alexander's apartment where I'd been staying, I found an unexpected visitor in the lobby. Thomas looked terrible, unshaven, wearing rumpled clothes. The doorman was uneasy. Ms. Vance, I tried to explain you don't take unscheduled visits. It's fine, Peter, I said calmly. We can speak here. Thomas straightened as I approached, trying to summon his old confidence. Mother, this has gone far enough. The family's private business is becoming public spectacle. Attempted murder isn't private business, Thomas. It's a felony. He flinched. That's a gross overstatement. Yes, I managed your medication and finances because you were becoming confused. Perhaps Dr. Miller's methods were aggressive. Stop. My voice cut through his excuses. I've seen the text messages between you and Miller discussing dosages to hasten my decline. I've heard the recordings of you and Sophia planning how to make my death look natural. His face paled. What do you want? He asked finally. Money? The money's gone, frozen or spent. The house, it's not even yours to give back. I want nothing from you, I replied, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. That's what you never grasped. I gave you everything freely. Love, opportunity, support. You could have had it all legitimately by simply waiting, by being the son I believed you were. Then why continue with this prosecution? For revenge? That's beneath you. Not revenge, consequences, and protection not just for me, but for others. Miller has had other patients, other victims. This must end. He tried one last approach, voice softening to the gentle tone he'd used giving me pills. Mom, please, we're still family. I studied him, the stranger wearing my son's face, and felt a strange calm replace the pain. No, Thomas, we're not family anymore. We're plaintiff and defendant. That is the relationship you chose.
October 16th, 5 months after the confrontation. Autumn had painted the city in gold and rust. My own transformation continued in parallel, some days stronger than others, the lingering effects appearing less often. They're offering a plea deal, Grace Chen explained during our weekly meeting. The legal process had moved with methodical slowness. What are the terms?
I asked, setting aside the Nexus blueprints. For Thomas, guilty plea to financial elder abuse, fraud, and attempted aggravated assault. 8 years, eligible for parole after 5. She slid the document over. For Sophia, guilty plea to conspiracy and financial fraud. 3 years, eligible after 18 months. I studied the proposal. And Dr. Miller? 6 years and permanent revocation of his medical license. He's cooperating, providing information on other similar cases. The thought of other elderly victims made my chest tighten. What do you recommend? Grace leaned back. The evidence is strong, but trials are unpredictable and could take years. This guarantees consequences without a lengthy public proceeding where defense attorneys would attack your mental status. I considered her words. A trial meant testifying, reliving the betrayal, having my competence questioned. I'll consider it, I replied, tucking the document away. That evening, Alexander and I dined on his terrace. In the 5 months since moving into his guest room, our relationship had become a comfortable companionship. Not romantic, those feelings belonged to a different time, but something perhaps more valuable, mutual respect. You're quiet tonight, he observed. Thinking about the plea offer, I explained the terms. Part of me wants to refuse, to push for maximum sentences. Alexander nodded. Understandable. What's stopping you? Practicality. A trial would be draining, potentially damaging to the Institute and Nexus. I paused. And perhaps I'm just ready to build something new instead of demolishing the old. Later, unable to sleep, I was at my drafting table. Alexander had made a studio space for me in his library. I was sketching modifications to the Nexus Community Center when my phone rang. An unknown number. Miss Vance. A woman's voice, tentative. This is Sophia. My grip tightened on the pencil. How did you get this number? That's not important. I needed to speak with you before... Hesitated. Before I accept the plea deal. I stayed silent. I want you to know it wasn't my idea, the medication. I mean, her voice had the practiced sincerity I knew well. Thomas and Dr. Miller arranged everything. I just went along. The recordings suggest otherwise. Sophia, recordings can be misinterpreted. A pause. I'm calling because I need you to know I found clarity through this experience, spiritual growth. I almost laughed. You found religion facing prison. How convenient. I'm trying to make amends. Her composure cracked slightly. Thomas manipulated me just like he manipulated you. You were 35 with an MBA and a prior investigation for elder financial exploitation in Boston. I let that sink in. Marcus Thorne is very thorough. Her sharp intake of breath was audible. That case was dropped. Yes, your previous victim died before charges could be filed. Convenient timing seems to be your pattern. The pretense of remorse vanished. You think you've won, don't you? The great Eleanor Vance back on top. But Thomas was right about one thing. You'll die alone in that sterile apartment surrounded by your precious blueprints instead of family. I'd rather die surrounded by honest designs than dishonest family, Sophia.
January 16th, 1 year after discovering the betrayal. The Vance Institute for Emerging Engineers welcomes you. The engraved stone plaque shone in the winter sun as reporters gathered for the official opening of my former home, now a learning center. The timing was deliberate. 1 year since I'd overheard Sophia's fatal birthday wish. Clara stood proudly beside me, now the Institute's director. Behind us, the first scholarship students waited. Miss Vance, how does it feel to see your home transformed? Called a reporter. I stepped to the microphone, mindful of my balance. One lingering effect was occasional vertigo. Engineering has always been about transformation, turning vision into reality, ideas into spaces where lives unfold. This building has been transformed many times, first from land to home,
then from home to battlefield. I paused, meeting reporters' eyes. Now its final and most important transformation, from private residence to public legacy. A reporter raised a hand. "And your son, any comment on his sentencing last month?" Grace, nearby, moved to intervene, but I raised a hand slightly. "My son made his choices. The courts have determined the consequences. Today isn't about destruction, but creation. These students," I gestured behind me, "represent the future. They're what matters now." The legal proceedings had concluded. Thomas received 8 years, Sophia 3, and Dr. Miller 6, with his license revoked. More importantly, Grace's team had used Miller's cooperation to open investigations into other suspicious deaths. After the ceremony, Alexander guided me through my old home. The change was remarkable. My study, which Sophia had wanted for a closet, now held advanced design tech. The dining room, where Thomas gave me pills, was a lecture hall. "Does it feel strange?" asked Alexander as we paused in my old bedroom, now a library. "Less than I expected," I admitted. "It feels right." Later, the Sterling team hosted a reception celebrating the Nexus groundbreaking. At 76, I was the center of attention, not as a curiosity, but as an active professional. The innovations in the community center are remarkable, particularly the integration of wellness and employment resources. I smiled. Engineering isn't just about structures. It's about designing systems that support human potential. Moving through the crowd, I saw myself in a mirrored wall. The woman there bore little resemblance to the fragile person I'd been a year before. My posture was straight, my gaze direct, though my hands still sometimes trembled, a permanent reminder. My handshake remained firm. Howard Sterling tapped his glass. A toast to Eleanor Vance, whose vision for the metropolitan nexus will transform not just our city's skyline, but its very social fabric. As applause filled the room, I felt a complex emotion. Pride. Not the defensive pride I'd once taken in Thomas's achievements, but a simpler, cleaner pride in work well done. After, Grace approached with news about the other cases from Dr. Miller's cooperation. We're making progress. 2 families have found closure, knowing what happened to their loved ones, and the 3rd case is promising. She smiled. "Your case created a template. You've helped more people than you know." It's never too late to redesign your life from the foundation up.
May 16th, 1 year after the confrontation. I stood in the visitors area of a federal prison. The room simulated normalcy, beige walls, plastic chairs, humming vending machines, but its purpose was undeniable. "Are you sure?" Alexander had asked that morning. I needed to do this alone. Thomas entered wearing a khaki uniform that hung loose. Prison had aged him, his hair grayer, his posture less assured. The arrogance was gone, replaced with wariness. "Mother," he said, sitting, "this is unexpected." "Is it? I told your attorney I was coming." He nodded. "Yes, but I didn't think you'd actually—" He gestured vaguely. "Why are you here?" A fair question. Over the past year, I had rebuilt my life, while his was dismantled. The Institute flourished. Nexus had broken ground on its 2nd building. My new lakeside home, a glass and steel design for my needs, was complete. "I wanted to see you," I said simply, "before I move forward completely." His eyes narrowed. "Move forward?" "I'm leaving for a 3-month international tour next week. Singapore, Tokyo, Barcelona, reviewing innovative projects for Nexus's next phase. At my age, travel is a significant undertaking, especially with the lasting health issues from your actions. You wanted to say goodbye, in case something happens." His voice held a hint of the old calculation.
Updating your will before you go? I had to smile at his persistence. Thomas, there's nothing left for you. The Institute has the house. My professional assets are in a trust for education. My personal wealth, what you didn't transfer, is for scholarships and research. Then why come at all? Genuine confusion crossed his face. I studied him. This man who had been my only child, my expected legacy, and felt an emotion that surprised me: pity. I came because I wanted to understand not just what you did, but why. What makes a person decide a parent's life is worth less than their impatience for an inheritance? He looked away. You wouldn't understand. Try me. I've spent a year rebuilding. That requires understanding what failed. It started small. After Dad died, you were so capable, running the firm, winning awards, never needing anyone. Then when Uncle David died, you finally seemed vulnerable, human. So you exploited that vulnerability. He winced. I helped you, genuinely at first, but then I saw how easily you accepted my help with technology, finances. It felt like, finally, having power in our relationship. And Sophia. Sophia saw opportunity. She's always been practical. The new pill, the one you introduced right before the confrontation, that was meant to be the end, wasn't it? He didn't deny it. Miller said your heart wouldn't last 3 months on that regimen. I nodded, absorbing this final confirmation. You would have watched me die, day by day. I would have been the devoted son, caring for his ailing mother. He corrected. The narrative was important. Yes, I suppose it was.
January 16th, 2 years to the day, I hosted a gathering on the terrace of my new lakeside home, a modernist structure that accommodated my limitations while expressing strength and clarity. To Eleanor Vance and the second phase of the Metropolitan Nexus, Howard Sterling raised his glass as the small group applauded. The past 2 years had transformed not just my circumstances, but my understanding of value. My recovery had plateaued. The tremors in my left hand were permanent, as were occasional cognitive lapses and reduced stamina. But these were integrated aspects, not defining features. The community impact stats are remarkable, Grace Chen commented, now a federal judge. She examined the project report. Victor, arriving late, joined us. In 2 years, our relationship had evolved into a partnership of equals, with separate homes but intertwined lives. Sorry I'm delayed, he said. The Singapore investors had questions about sustainability metrics. As conversations flowed, I observed this assembly. Not family by blood, but a community formed by choice. Clara and her son, now the Institute's educational head. Marcus Thorne, the Foundation's security consultant. The first graduating scholars. Grace and her family. A speech, called Howard. I smiled, shaking my head. I'm an engineer, Howard. We build, we don't talk. Nonsense, Alexander countered. I've sat through your client presentations. You can talk. Yielding, I moved to the terrace edge, the lake and skyline before us. 2 years ago today, I began, I faced a choice between accepting a planned ending or designing a new beginning. As an engineer, the answer was obvious. I gestured toward the Nexus model. We build. Murmurs of agreement. But what I've learned since is that the most important designs aren't structures or projects. They're the connections between people, the foundations of trust, the frameworks of purpose we create together. After guests left, Alexander stayed, helping Clara clear glasses. You seem thoughtful, he observed as we watched moonlight on the water. I got a letter from Thomas yesterday, I explained. His first in 18 months. Alexander's expression tightened. What did he want? To say he's up for parole next year. He's done rehab programs, found faith, written a memoir on toxic families. Will you respond? I shook my head. There's nothing left to say. Some structures, once fundamentally broken, can't be fixed. They can only be studied for their failures and left behind. Alexander nodded. Any regrets? I considered it. The physical aftermath remained. The tremors, memory lapses, managed stamina. Yet these had forced innovative adaptations in my home and work. Only that I didn't call you sooner, I answered truthfully. I lost years to fear before Thomas ever gave me those pills. Alexander reached for my hand. We have now, and we're using it well. Inside my perfectly engineered home, plans for Nexus's third phase lay ready. On my desk, applications for next year's scholarships waited. The occasional tremor in my hands remained a permanent reminder of what was nearly lost. But like any good engineer, I had incorporated this structural reality into my design. To second chances, I said, raising my glass, and to the engineers who build them, Alexander replied. Against the skyline, where my old design stood beside new ones, I embraced the truth that saved me. It's never too late to redesign your life. If this story meant something to you, please like this video and subscribe to Winds of Thought. Share your own stories of resilience in the comments below. Your voice matters.